Hello and welcome to the 3D Blu-ray Bunker. This is a place where we look exclusively at 3D Blu-rays, not to review the film but to almost entirely focus on the various aspects of the 3D, with just a short comment at the end about the film itself. And today we're looking at the 2016 Chinese-American co-production The Great Wall. As with most 3D films, by 2016 this one was post-converted into 3D rather than being natively shot in 3D. The film opens with the camera moving in on the Universal logo's globe, and the camera moves over to China here, I suppose perhaps as a reference to that old myth about the Great Wall of China being visible from space. But what's most noticeable here is that the clouds have been placed into 3D with quite some enthusiasm, as I reckon the depth beyond them shows them to be a good 1,000 miles or so above the planet. It's not exactly accurate, but it's nice to see some fun being had with the 3D right from the get-go. Those clouds come under the description of hyperstereo, and there are a few other hyperviews in the film, to various degrees. Like this gorgeous view across the landscape has been given way more depth than natural human vision would capture, and it looks all the better for it in my opinion. And this view of the wall is also a bit hyper too. There are several views of the wall like this in the film, and they've all got some depth to them, again more than you'd see if you were actually there. I think my favourite hyperstereo shot in the film is this view down a tunnel. There's a great amount of exaggerated depth here, which helps with the feeling of putting you in the scene. This is a beautiful looking film with great cinematography and fantastic production design. Loads of it is extremely well suited to 3D, so for example the wall is populated by a large number of troops, and one of the ways 3D can shine is if the frame is packed with detail, and that's very often the case here with row upon row of soldiers, frequently soldiers carrying spears, so there's plenty for the 3D to do. We get a few shots of these rows of drummers, which is not only a nice piece of 3D, but your subwoofer will lap this one up too. Sometimes there's even almost an overwhelming amount of detail, like here, with so many spears held up that I'm not convinced that the conversion managed to isolate each and every one of them, but this view still looks great in 3D. On the whole though, the conversion is very thorough. Like here, this is one of those shots which I think wouldn't look this good if it had been natively shot, because not only are the two arrows placed strongly in front of all the people below, but there's also clear depth and separation in between all of those people too. The wall setting is full of a variety of structures, all of which have a design that shows off a good 3D effect, from this contraption deep inside the wall, whose composition stretches deep into the frame, or this platform that we see a lot of for people to dive off, and a great thing about this is that it looks fantastic in 3D from all sorts of different angles, so the side-on view here works well, or looking at it head-on has some of the arms poking out of the screen, which I don't think is at all gimmicky, as the 3D helps to emphasise that walking out onto the end of this thing is quite a big deal. There's another great view of the platform too, probably my favourite, and it's this top-down one where the 3D does its usual excellent job of dramatically increasing the sense of height. It's superb, and we get to see the view down from the platform, which is also made much more impressive by not only having a strong 3D effect, but there's also these faint wisps of smoke that are sitting in their own 3D space as well. Faces are usually nice and solid, so a pre-shave Matt Damon here has a beard occupying 3D space, and his whole face has a proper feeling of solidity to it. In fact, I'd say that his beard is probably more three-dimensional than his performance, but that's another story. These arrows are placed well in front of the guys behind them in a shot that, like many in the film, looks like it was set up to look good in 3D, and there's really not a moment in the film where you find yourself wondering whether it's in 3D or not. Actually, there is one sequence telling the history of the monsters, which is an animated sequence where the only real effort to give it any extra dimension was to put some of the pages that it's played out on above some of the others. I didn't notice anything wrong with any of the 3D either. The only time where I thought it drew attention to itself, in an incredibly minor negative way, were a couple of views like this, where the horse's ears at the very bottom of the frame, that would go unnoticed in 2D, did rather draw attention to themselves by being placed into the correct 3D space, but that's not meant as a criticism of any sort though. When the action kicks off, the film shifts up gear from its already very good 3D, and we get a few excellent views like this, where the smoke trails coming off the flaming projectiles feel incredibly solid, and a lot of them are placed in front of the screen. These are pretty mesmerising 3D shots, and again they look to me like they were designed with 3D in mind, and like that platform, they don't just look good from one angle, as there's another great top-down view of them where you can very clearly see the depth beyond the smoke trails to the ground below. There are a few arrows that come out towards us, and best of all when they're in slow motion like this one, so there's plenty of time to appreciate the rock-solid 3D here. There's a great sequence set at the foot of the wall where the ground is shrouded in mist, which in 2D is effective at increasing the unease about what's lurking out beyond it, and that feeling is increased by the extra dimension here, so I thought this was another one of the film's really creative and clever uses of 3D, not to mention the huge amount of pop-out thrown in for good measure with that chain coming way out of the screen. There are some awesome views of explosions that I think are amongst the best I've seen. What you more usually see in explosion shots is stuff being flung at the camera, and there's a little bit of that going on here, but what I thought was so good about these shots is the amount of depth and separation within the explosion itself. It reminded me a bit of shots of foliage, where the view in 2D just can't be properly understood, and where you need the depth information to work out where every branch and leaf belongs. Well, it's the same here, where the view in 2D, whilst very picturesque, just doesn't begin to make sense, in the same way it does in 3D, when you can clearly see where every trail of smoke belongs. These are really excellent views. And it's not just the explosive action scenes where the 3D is on excellent form, like these lanterns look fantastic, both in front of and behind the screen, and it's not like there's just a few of them, but there's hundreds, thousands even, and effective 3D I think can always benefit from tons of detail, which is why particle effects, for example, like ash often look so good. There are other low-key things that look good too, like this metaphorical and literal moment of reflection where Matt Damon's face is put into exactly the right space behind the shiny surface. Again, it's very well done and very effective. There's another subtle little moment where what I assume is some dust or muck on the lens causes some of the light to flare up, and you can barely see it here in 2D, but they've gone out of their way to place that way out in front of the image. There's plenty of pop-out in the film, some of it held for a good long time, like those slow-motion arrows, or this knife. There are some of the more typical ultra-quick pop-outs too, like this burst of green blood coming out of one of the Tautei monsters. It's a very quick shot, but very good. The only time where I thought the 3D felt gimmicky was with this pole holding the rock being thrust out towards us. It's certainly an effective piece of pop-out, but it does come across as that sort of 3D filmmaking that I think most people associate with the 1980s wave of 3D films. One of those shots that would look very out of place in 2D. Not that I'm particularly against gimmicky 3D shots per se, but sometimes they can look a bit silly. I'm not sure I'd call this one a gimmicky shot. I don't think so, but it's an unusual view looking back up at the guy holding a bunch of keys, and the 3D here is very strong in a good fun shot. The composition throughout the film is almost always good for 3D, with the framing in shots like this just sort of casually looking good without anything flashy going on, but there's plenty of detail and depth and separation. Corridors often look good in 3D, and this one especially so. Not only does it stretch deep into the screen, but there are these great shafts of light coming down through the length of it. So, a very quick word about the film itself. It's a story about the fight against a massive swarm of alien monsters attacking the Great Wall of China. It's filled with gorgeous design. It's a fantastic looking and colourful film, although maybe its biggest problem is Matt Damon, who for some reason gives a bit of an underwhelming performance here in a fairly underwritten role. Him and his sidekick Pedro Pascal promise a good bit of buddy movie fun early on, but it ends up not really fully developing and delivering on that front. I liked Jing Tian as the Chinese commander, and the whole thing felt fairly epic, even if maybe the ultimate solution did seem a little bit convenient. It's one of those films that seemed to get a far worse reception than I think it deserved, and whilst it's not really of the same quality of director Yimou Zhang's Hero or House of Flying Daggers, because it's a little bit daft at heart, I still thought it was really good fun. So, a perfectly fun film with almost non-stop great 3D. It's very highly recommended by me for your 3D Blu-ray collection. So I hope you found this in some way useful, and if so, I hope you'll join me again soon for another 3D Blu-ray review. Until then, thanks for looking on this one. Cheers for now. Bye-bye.